Hi, welcome to Chapter 2, Section 2.1. In this video, we're going to talk about ways to talk about a graph. So things that are going to get included in this is talking about whether or not the function's increasing or decreasing. We'll talk about maximums and minimums, concavity, intercepts, domain and range, and asymptotes. So I'm hoping that you've seen the bottom three already. This is something that isn't new to you. You've seen before, but the top three I think are going to be new to you, and that's okay. We'll have fun with it. So starting at the top, in my own words, if I want to talk about whether or not something's increasing or decreasing, I'm going to look at the function always from left to right. And I imagine that there is a person standing on top of my graph, and that person is walking left to right. And at first, this person would go downhill. So I would call that decreasing. And then at looks like -3, the person would start to walk uphill. So I'd call that increasing. So it's kind of about whether or not the slope is positive or negative. So I'm going to put that right here. So slope positive, or negative. Oops, I missed a whole letter. So it's whether or not the slope is positive or negative. Okay, so and we'll go into this more deeply later on. Maximums and minimums, when I think of maximums and minimums, I think of those as like the peaks on a mountain range. So I'm putting dots on the peaks, and the valleys in that same little range, the low points, the lowest points in an area. And then concavity, when I think of concavity, I kind of imagine cups. So, for example, to me, right here, that looks like a cup that's facing down. So that would be concave down. And then in here, it looks like a cup that's facing up. So that would be concave up. And again, we'll talk more about that in a minute. So the first problem, just to kind of start discussing it, is f of x increasing or decreasing at x equals 2? So again, we're going to imagine that there's a person at x equals 2, and that person is always moving left or right. And at x equals 2, left to right, if that person was walking left to right, that person would be going downhill, so that's decreasing. Is the graph increasing or decreasing at x equals -3? Well, this is kind of confusing. So at -3, and I'm sorry that my graph isn't perfect, but I do want you to imagine that like bottom right there, that the minimum there, that's happening at x equals -3. So at that point, the person has just finished walking downhill and is about to start walking uphill. So they're neither increasing or decreasing. So here I would say neither. Okay, 3, for what intervals is f of x increasing? And I'm thinking of on the x-axis. So where's f of x increasing? So starting left to right, and I'm assuming this function kind of goes like this as you go left and right. So, but starting from the left, I want to know where it's increasing. That's all the way until x equals -5. So negative infinity to -5. And then it stops. The person would start walking downhill until -3. Oh, by the way, I'm going to use a U here. If you're not familiar with this notation, this is something I'm expecting you to have seen before, but if you haven't, just send me a message on the Q&A board. We can talk about it. but I'm doing a union of these two intervals, negative infinity to negative 5, and then negative 3 all the way. See, so the person would go uphill all the way until x equals 0, so negative 3 to 0. And then that person would walk downhill until, we're going to go with, we're going to round to 3. So union from 3 all the way to roughly 5. So walking uphill, downhill, and then at 7 again. That person seems to walk uphill until about 9. And then it's downhill from there. So I want to pause. This is important. Notice I'm using x values. That is how I should be doing it. That is important. I'm going to answer with x values. This can be confusing for people. There is actually a reason for this. If you use y values, then it's like totally overlapping and it won't work. So you do have to use x values to answer these questions. So for number 4, for what intervals is f of x decreasing? All right, let's erase what I've got just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so again, if you're moving left to right, it's decreasing from about negative 5 to negative 3. And then from, let's see, here all the way to there, and there to there, and there onward. Okay, so that would be negative 5 to negative 3, and then 0 to 3, and then 5 to 7, and then 9 to infinity. Okay, and then number 5 says, for which values of x is f of x neither increasing nor decreasing? So not increasing or decreasing. So right in here, it's, the slope is 0. Same thing here. And so it's basically all of these like in between values, like negative 5, negative 3, 3, 5, 7, and 9. 0, yeah. So we can make a list of all of those values. So again, we are for sure going to use x values, especially because it says for what values of x. Negative 5, negative 3, and then 0 was 1, even though it's off the screen. 3, 5, 7, and 9. Okay, let's pause here and take a moment if you need to ask questions on the discussion board.